After Marathon got announced and released a little bit of gameplay and some other trailers and stuff a little bit over a week ago, I've been fairly invested in this game. Finally, some new extraction shooter blood, I was thinking. But yeah, that doesn't seem to be entirely the case. Now, I don't mean to color this negatively. There are definitely things about the game that I am very positive to and that I find intriguing and interesting, and I'm excited to see how they're going to play out. However, there's a lot of concerns that I have, especially one overarching one. So let's have a little bit of a chat about Marathon. The game very obviously tries to take the loot extraction shooter and streamline it to make it more accessible and casual friendly. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this, and I really do respect the effort. However, loot extraction shooters are difficult games to make. This is very evident with Escape from Tarkov, where its only real competitor is a straight-up copy in almost every sense, being a quintessential Chinese knockoff in Arena Breakout Infinite, or ABI as we'll call it. Now, one of Tarkov's main problems have always been accessibility, and its very rough new player experience. Tarkov has an extremely steep learning curve, and is a very unwelcoming game in a lot of ways, to the point where it has severely hamstrung its own ability to recruit new players to its player base. Coming from Tarkov as my main game, having made my account back in 2015, there are a lot of things to critique in Tarkov, and the Tarkov community does that very well. However, Tarkov's inaccessibility, its steep learning curve, its very deep and complex mechanics, its complete lack of handholding, is also what makes progression in that game feel so good. It's what makes Tarkov remain interesting to play, and it's what allows you to keep building mastery in the game thousands of hours in. There is a common joke, or meme in Tarkov, that less than 1,000 hours played and you've basically barely touched the game. There are players with 8, 10, 15,000 hours in the game learning new stuff. This skill ceiling is absolutely astronomical in Tarkov. Now, this is important because an extraction shooter has a very specific and sort of basic overarching gameplay loop. You load in, you kill enemy players and AI, you get loot and survive. If you die, you lose all the gear you brought in. Do this repeatedly and grow your stash and your economy. Then you can buy better gear as your stash and economy grows. And this gameplay loop is so basic and simple that you need to wipe the game repeatedly and consistently to keep it relevant. Tarkov has done that forever. Marathon also recognizes that they need to do that, thankfully. If not, the game's gameplay doesn't retain its relevance. Loot extraction shooters don't really have a story, at least that is in any way relevant. They do have world building, which is important, but I have never found myself playing Tarkov for the story, because it is a multiplayer game in essence. And this means that this simple loop is the main driver of the game. Therefore, it is very important that all the other parts of the game and all the other systems weigh up for that basic and simple loop. And this is why Tarkov has succeeded, thanks to its very deep systems. Its extensive weapon modding with a huge impact on weapon performance, its huge array of quests without any in-game pointers for where to go, its large variety of weapons, its realistic and complex ballistic system, its armor plate system, its healing and injury system with fractures, blacked out limbs, different stimulants and meds, its very detailed world with detailed maps that on their own take thousands of hours to master and to find every cheeky spot or angle. Now, I'm not saying that Marathon needs to be like that. I'm not saying it needs to be like Tarkov. I don't want that, trust me. One Tarkov is enough. But Marathon, to my eyes, doesn't have its own version of this depth. It doesn't have this same skill ceiling in any real way that I can see. I appreciate its different look, its different style of game, it being more arcadey. I like that. But I think Bungie needs to figure out how they are going to compensate for the loot extraction shooter loop being so simple. Tarkov found its way to do that. What is Marathon's? And I am not alone in this either, having watched several people talking about their experience getting to play the game over the last year or so. I have at this point heard quite a lot of iterations of something's missing. And this is making me quite concerned that Marathon doesn't have what it takes to be interesting enough for people to keep playing it in the long term. I hope I'm wrong, but that's my concern. Now, with Marathon basically taking the loot extraction shooter formula of Tarkov and trying to simplify it, Simplifying one or a few aspects might not be a problem, it might even be an improvement. Trying to simplify every single central aspect of the game, its skill expression and its gameplay systems, is probably not going to be a good thing, because in game design, accessible, unfortunately, tends to end up being a fancy word for shallow. Marathon cannot copy Tarkov so closely and just simplify everything. They need to add something of their own. They need to add their own twist to it, which they need to do if the game is going to have a future. The game and the developers emphasize some changes, and some of these could potentially be good changes. It could, by focusing on events and ever-changing tasks from the factions, basically the traders, improve the quest and task system, which is one of the changes they have talked about. Because if they were different or new every wipe, it could keep it fresh and interesting. This is also a big complaint from a lot of players in Tarkov that quests are repetitive and it's boring to do the same ones every 6 months. But again, this removes the knowledge-based skill advantage of learning the game's tasks, remembering locations for tasks and items needed, etc., to get better and more efficient at completing said tasks for every wipe or prestige, which is the case in Tarkov. The gameplay is very arcadey. Now, the good part about that is that Bungie is very good at exactly that. Halo and Destiny are some of the best games ever made in that category, even though it's no longer the good old Bungie in a lot of ways, but that's a different topic. The bad part is that I think it's going to be difficult to make that compatible with an extraction shooter game, and therefore I have some concerns about that. The biggest one in terms of pure gameplay is a quite long time to kill, as far as I can tell from the gameplay we have seen. Now, this is a big concern for solo players, which I am, because having limited or no ways to deal with an opponent quickly is going to make it a problem to fight more than one opponent. I know they have said that while you can play the game solo, it's not actually tuned for it, which is fair enough. If it sucks to play it solo because that's not intended or that's not what they want from me, I'll just not play it. But I think they are, by doing that, cutting out a lot of the players that would be the most interested in actually playing it, like myself. People also can't play with their friends all the time and might not want to play with randoms. This means that the people who might actually want to play the game just won't, at least not close to as much as they otherwise would, which can't be a good thing for the game. Balancing around 3 versus 3 also costs the game a lot of its skill ceiling. One of the things that makes Tarkov, for example, such a deep game is its very dynamic time to kill and how it rewards good aim, where headshots are very powerful and will one-shot headshot, where body shots might need 5 to 7 bullets before you kill an opponent. And grenades are pretty much a guaranteed one-shot if you can land it. But also how it rewards premeditation and setup for a kill attempt, in terms of things like positioning and balancing tenacity and aggression, and getting the drop on your enemy. The game gives you all of these ways for you to leverage your knowledge of the game or mechanical skill to quickly deal with an opponent, which allows you to take on multiple opponents. This means that it's perfectly viable to play the game in really any configuration. Solo, duo, 3-man, 4-man, 5-man. While there is obviously still a disadvantage to being solo compared to a 3-man, for example, it is much more even. Tarkov also balances out having big teams because there is no UI elements for friendlies. There's no radar or map, so communication is key, meaning a 5-man usually devolves into pure chaos with some team kills sprinkled in there. Even a 3-man can be chaotic enough. Solo players actually having a slight advantage in this case by being able to shoot indiscriminately because no one's your teammate. In a team, you also need to split certain quest items or quest kill targets. You might also need to share loot, none of which the solo has to. Besides sharing loot, Marathon doesn't seem to have these trade-offs for playing in a team, meaning it is only an advantage to be in a team and only a disadvantage to being solo. Marathon also has downs, where an enemy can't be revived after you quote-unquote kill them, which will make it a lot harder to take on teams. There is also the fact that the game has pings. I despise this, to be honest. It is such a crutch for teamwork, and it allows people to bypass needing good teamwork in terms of communication or positioning and control. There is just not the same need to play off of each other and cover each other in different directions. Everyone can just run around like baboons and try to spot an enemy team or player as early as possible and then mark them. I'm also worried that this means, and I think it will, that solo play is going to be really painful, because the ability to sow confusion or to positionally outplay opponents is just cut off at the knee. as you'll be marked every time you're spotted, and in a 1 versus 3, that's basically a death sentence. This is also going to help teamfights be incredibly predictable. Teamfights are going to devolve into, and I pretty much guarantee this, teamfights are going to devolve into sitting in a building or on a good cover overlook position, trying to spot and then ping the enemy team as early as possible. Then you try and get a pick on the enemy team and then rush them, like it has been in every other game that does the same. The fact that team play seems to be so heavily incentivized, especially by the game having a team fill function that's also enabled by default, I think is also going to be a negative, because it means pretty much everything you will fight will be a team. If solo is hard due to long time to kill and pings, etc., then let's be honest, people just aren't going to play solo, besides the uniquely interested ones, which there aren't that many of. And if everything you fight is a team, that is going to make every fight very predictable. Contrast this with Tarkov or ABI, where players for a reason joke with "there's always one more," because in a fight you never know how many players you are fighting. It could be just that one guy, or it could be 4. And this creates a lot of tension and anticipation, which Marathon is just not going to have. The gunplay looks fairly static in terms of recoil, and it all seems fairly easy to control, which makes sense with a game with longer time to kill and faster movement. You want to give room for players to win fights by landing consecutive shots, and that being the main skill expression in the gunplay, just like it is in most arcade shooters. And this is all good and nice, but it gets fairly stagnant after a while. There isn't really skill expression and dynamics in the gunplay as much as it is in movement. As everyone has such an easy time landing shots, the obvious counter to this is being harder to hit. Even more so the case thanks to consoles, crossplay, and aim assist. This means you cannot have the same diversity in guns and weaponry as you can with a game where gunplay is the main skill expression, as every gun has to be somewhat the same ease of use to account for the faster movement and longer time to kill, as well as console play. In Tarkov, every gun works slightly differently and has different recoil stats, ergonomics, weight, modability. Some weapons even have different recoil angles. And as a result, every weapon is its own challenge, its own aspect of the game that you need to master the use of. Now, of course, like other games, like arcade shooters as well, weapons are different in terms of time to kill or in general damage outputs and fire rate and what type of gun it is, etc. But having all those other areas in which a gun can be different in terms of controlling and using it and have different strengths makes for an incredible amount of replayability and skill ceiling in the gunplay. Things like ammo can also be a modifier for this. Better ammo is a faster time to kill, risk and reward, and this creates investment. Also, in a more general sense, the Marathon gunplay just looks very cookie cutter. Random spray deviation when firing from the hip, need to ADS to hit accurately, while Tarkov has a very in-depth ballistic system, which it takes time to learn and entails that bullets will behave differently based on factors like a weapon's MOA, which is its accuracy, simply put, and muzzle velocity. Marathon, as far as I can tell, does not have this. In a game like Tarkov, hipfire is a very viable thing, as guns will shoot where they point, meaning you can accurately shoot from the hip if you know what you're doing, which is another example of skill expression that Marathon doesn't seem to have. The modding of weapons in Marathon also seems very underwhelming. It's like 3 mods that you can put on it. That's it. Compared to Tarkov or ABI, that is abysmal. There is no way to personalize a gun and the way that you like running said gun. Now, this is hopefully going to be fine if the guns have enough variety in the 3 mods that you can use. They have also said that some of the higher end mods are going to change the way a gun fundamentally works. So hopefully that's going to make up for it. I'm also not ecstatic about it being a hero shooter. Again, this is obviously done to streamline the utility aspect of the game. They are trying to sell it as team composition mattering, which probably isn't untrue in itself. I just don't think it's going to matter that much, at least not in terms of synergy and dynamics, as there doesn't really seem to be any real interplay or counters between the different utility of the different heroes. It also makes it very predictable what you are fighting, as heroes will be quite easily distinguishable both from appearance and also from their utility, meaning that the moment you see some utility or get a quick look at the character model, you know what you're fighting. And in a game like Tarkov, this is something that you would need to gather from getting a thorough view of the enemy player, and besides that, you can't really know. Guy could have any odd type of grenade or utility and you have no real way of knowing, or some secondary that you can't easily see. meaning that you'll need to adapt as you fight the enemy. A hero shooter will make everything much more predictable and much more obvious, again removing a lot of the tension. Now, I'm not saying that having hero-based classes are necessarily all bad, but it's not my preference, and I also think it's a fairly cynical practice to sell cosmetics more than anything by abusing a revolving meta, new heroes added in updates, and likely battle pass and the whole fucking lot. The cosmetics are supposed to be something that you unlock through account milestones, and if they keep it to that, I don't really mind it at all. I think it's good for players to be able to show off achievements and accomplishments and skill in a tangible way. However, this is likely going to come with a bunch of microtransactions though, as another way to acquire cosmetics, which I am not a fan of. The kits of the heroes also look really straightforward and not really like there is a lot new added. There's a shield, there's stealth, it's the same we've seen many times before. That also makes the part of the game that is supposed to make up the tactical or utility part very uninteresting, at least for me. There's also quite a lot of AI that you will be fighting, and they're supposedly fairly difficult according to people that have played the game, and can be fairly challenging to deal with. I've heard people say that they are therefore more than just noise traps, but to me that sounds even worse, to be honest, and like a dream for anyone that wants to third party. Being stuck fighting AI is not something that I'm going to enjoy, and I think that's the case for most players, at least the ones that are interested in actual PvP. And this is something they should be mindful of, because I think it would be a detriment to the tension of the game if you are going to encounter AI every time you move. ABI kind of has this problem, where there is just so much AI at times that it detracts from the PvP and the game's tension. Loot in the game looks extremely uninteresting. It seems to give you the value of each item, which completely removes the need for you to learn what is valuable and worth taking. This removes a big part of the skill and depth of a game like this, loot extraction shooters. Again, ABI has a little bit of the same problem, I feel, where so much of the loot that you come across is simply worthless or close to worthless, and only is it like red or yellow items, I think, that are like worth taking, meaning most of the looting you do is shifting through worthless shit. In Tarkov, close to every single item has a purpose, something that makes it useful. It can be needed for a quest, a barter at a trader, it could be food or water, which your character needs regularly, it could be used to upgrade your hideout or to craft other items in the hideout, or it can simply just be worth a lot. And this means that loot prio is ever-changing and dynamic for you, based on where you are in your progression. I hear from various reviewers that one of the big problems for the game is that it doesn't really incentivize or drive PvP successfully, and as far as I can gather, it's because of the lackluster loot and more specifically, the lack of high-value loot areas. Also, when looking at the value of items, there is just not a big span between the items. High-value items are usually just 2 to 3 times as much as what seems to be the average, and this span of item value should be way bigger. And then you should also just focus a lot of the loot, high-value loot, in specific areas of the map, and you have PvP. It's not that hard to facilitate. Tarkov used to be amazing at that. It's a lot worse now, thanks to dynamic loot, but that's how you do it, and that's needed to drive the PvP in a game like this. But that was it. That's my little rant on Marathon. Let me know what you guys think about the game in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I'm curious to know. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Take care.